Hello world, welcome back to the Nitro RC, and I'm doing another video within the RC Basics series. So this is how to start a nitro car as well as stop it. I'll kind of go through the basics. If you've never had an RC nitro car before, this may be a little bit intimidating. It definitely was for me, even though I've been doing RC for 8 or 9 years now. Just got into nitro about a year ago, and I honestly had no idea where to start. It was all kind of foreign to me. There wasn't a lot of good information, so I thought I'd make a video on how to start a nitro car. So special shout out to NitroRC.com for sponsoring this series of videos. We do have a 5% off coupon code. They're a big supporter of the channel, so definitely check them out. They also have pretty cheap shipping throughout Europe. Carry Tamiya, HPI, Team Corrali, Traxxas, Arma, pretty much all the big brands that you would want to buy, and they definitely make videos like this possible, so check them out. So what we've got in front of us is an HPI Racing WR8 3.0 Nitro on-road car or rally car. So we're just kind of going to go through the basics of actually how to get this thing started. So if you've never had a nitro car before, this should help you out for sure. I wish something like this was available when I first started in the nitro space. So first off, you definitely need a battery to plug into your actual vehicle. There are AA quad packs you can use, or you can use something like this, a life battery. That's what I prefer. Just kind of throw that in there. It's not important that everything kind of be on and everything, but you do need some sort of power. One interesting thing about nitro cars is that the nitro system and the radio system are kind of separate systems. So you can actually run the engine without the electronics being on. You can actually run the steering without the engine being on. There's no relation between the two, except that the throttle servo here is what's going to be actually controlling the throttle and the brakes. So I always like having the car actually powered on and stuff, but it's not absolutely required. You could actually move the servo by hand. Next thing you want to do is definitely turn on the radio. Make sure that thing turns on. Now then, you can go ahead and turn on the car. So there's a little switch here, usually on-off switch. You just want to make sure that the car actually operates. When you pull the throttle trigger, you should see the carburetor actually open and close here. So right there, you should see that. That's the carburetor, and that basically means that the car is working. So brakes should work, throttle should work, and then yeah, those are the basics for the electronics. Definitely you're going to need some fuel, so you definitely want some kind of fuel bottle, and then you'll need some fuel. Between 20 and 30% is what you're generally going to run on any sort of 10 scale or 8 scale nitro vehicle. So you just take your fuel bottle, take off the cap, you squeeze it, and you're just going to use basically vacuum to suck in some fuel into the fuel bottle. You don't need a ton. I recommend honestly just going about 50% in the fuel tank. You don't want to like completely fill it up, just in case you have some problems. You didn't waste a whole bunch of fuel in the fuel tank, because you do have to throw it away if once you pour it out basically. So here's the fuel tank. It is spring loaded. You just kind of lift it up, stick in your fuel bottle, squeeze it, fill it up about halfway, 2/3 at the most I would say, and then release the cap and it will close like that. Not a bad idea to put the cap back on the fuel bottle so it doesn't evaporate. Natural fuel does evaporate into the air, so that is something to be aware of. Now the car is on, the radio is on. The next thing you'll need is some kind of glow igniter. So these tend to be spring loaded. You just basically pull on the handle, and these little, I don't know what we call them, claw hand or whatever comes out, and that will actually wrap around the glow plug. The glow plug has a hex on it, so this just clamps onto the glow plug. You stick that on there. Well, you don't do that yet actually. Next thing to do is actually prime the vehicle. So there's a couple of different ways to prime it. I prefer actually shutting off the exhaust pipe and pulling on the starter handle. That basically creates like a vacuum or like a closed system where you're going to be pressurizing the fuel tank and pushing air into the carburetor here. If you have trouble actually priming the engine this way, you can blow on the hose here. You can actually pop off this hose, blow on it, which will actually push air into the fuel tank. That pressure will actually then push fuel out of the fuel tank into the carburetor, and that is another way to prime it. I'm not as big a fan of that because first you got to stick stuff in your mouth. But the second way, the second reason is that actually if you prime it using the pull handle and you're not able to, that's kind of an indication that you've got some kind of leak. Maybe you've got an exhaust seal that is ripped, maybe when your fuel hose is not attached, maybe your fuel tank is cracked. So it is kind of a good indicator that maybe you've got something wrong with the fuel system. The fuel system does have to be somewhat airtight, not completely airtight, but you do need to be able to create a vacuum and stuff. So the way you do this, just put one finger over the exhaust pipe, pull on the pull starter a few times, and you should see fuel actually go through the fuel hose into the carburetor. Once you see that fuel hit the carburetor, give it, you know, maybe 3, 4, 5 more pulls. If you find the fuel, the pull starter become like super hard to pull, you've actually got too much fuel in the engine, and you know that's when people break their pull starters, because it doesn't actually give, it'll just basically lock up. So just something to be aware, but you know, 4 or 5 pulls should be plenty to get the engine started. Now, last thing I like to do is give the engine a little bit of throttle. You can either turn up the throttle trim, so on this radio it's right here, or you can just pull the trigger a little bit. I'll just turn up the trim a little bit. Just helps to make it start up a little bit easier. And then we're gonna go ahead and try this. So I haven't started this car in a bunch of months, maybe a month or so, so we're gonna go ahead and try that. So put on the glow plug, that will ignite the glow plug. I like putting my knee on one wheel just to kind of hold the car down while you're pulling the glow plug or the pull starter, and then maybe another hand over here, somewhere around here, to hold down the chassis. And we're gonna go ahead and see if this thing can start. Maybe give it a little more throttle if you're not able to start it on the throttle trim there. Looks like we're getting close though. Once you got it started, good idea to put it on a stand. What you'll find is, especially in the beginning, you'll need to give it a little more idle just to keep it running until it's warmed up. And what you don't want is actually the car on the ground spinning the wheels but not having enough momentum to get it going. And what will end up is you might actually wear out the clutch pads a little bit. So I like putting it on a stand. That way, first off, it doesn't run off. But the second reason is, you know, if you hold down these wheels, you're actually kind of rubbing the clutch pads because they are spinning inside and will kind of wear out a little bit. So not a bad idea to do. Take it off and put it on a stand. Now, once you've started the car, you do need to let it warm up. It won't drive that well. It might stall until it's fully warmed up. But the next thing you might wonder is, like, how do you turn this thing off? Now that it's running, there are 3 different ways to actually turn off a nitro car. I'll kind of go through them separately. Easiest way is basically to just shut off the exhaust pipe. So basically plug up the exhaust pipe, kind of flood the engine. It won't be able to turn over, and that's the easiest way. You just cover it up and it should shut off. If it doesn't, you've got other issues, probably an air leak or something. But that is the easiest way. Only downside is, yeah, the exhaust tip can be a little hot, so you might want to use a, you know, a spare rag or something like that. But that is certainly the easiest way. We'll go ahead and fire this thing up again. Now, the second way to set it off is to basically starve it of fuel. This is the way Traxxas likes to do it. And we'll go ahead and do that. All you do is basically pinch the fuel line going into the carburetor. And it should shut off. Now, I had my idle up a little bit, so it took a little bit longer, but that's the second way to shut off a nitro car. Advantages of that is you basically burn off all the fuel inside the engine. That way, you know, if you leave this car for a few months sitting, the fuel inside doesn't basically, you know, congeal and turn into jelly. That can be another issue, clogging up your carburetor and stuff like that. So that's the advantage of that. Disadvantage of that is you do kind of starve the engine, which in general is not that great for the engine, because the fuel is what has the oil and lubricates the engine. So if you let it just burn all of it out, then you are running at high idle with, you know, basically not a whole lot of lubrication. So that's the downside. So we'll go ahead and fire this thing up one more time and show you the third way of shutting this off. So the last way to stop the engine is the way I prefer, and that's basically just stop the flywheel. So right here you've got the clutch and the flywheel spinning, and there should be a cutout underneath for your flywheel there. Flywheel right there, it's spinning. So take a rag of some sort, and then what you're going to do is basically just press against that flywheel there, and it should shut off immediately. Definitely use a rag or something so you don't, you know, hurt your hands, because those can be spinning pretty fast and actually you know, hurt your fingers. Now the pluses of that is you're not starving the engine, you're not flooding the engine. Either way with those other two methods, it's kind of like clean way, I think, to stop the engine without damaging it. And the engine has still got a little bit of fuel in there, so you can definitely fire it up right again without having to prime it. Only real downside is you do need something to stop it with. You can't just jam your finger in there, you'll probably injure yourself. So yeah, those are the three different ways to stop the engine once you have it running. Hopefully you found this video useful, and don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. If you have any questions, throw them down in the description below. I'll do my best to answer those, because Nitro definitely is a fun segment of the RC, you know, market or hobby, and I like seeing people getting started in it. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care now.